Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this video, I wanted to answer a viewer question that I got on a video I did about 6 different scenarios that you definitely want to be throwing a hollow body frog. So what I'm talking about is this bait right here. Nice hollow body frog. This is the poppin' version. This is actually a gambler frog that I really like. I've been experimenting with it the last couple years and it's pretty phenomenal. They come in a walking version too. But the question is from B Griffin 511. He asks, I have very little success hooking fish with a frog. Any suggestions on how to improve? This is a common issue, really, honestly. I've dealt with this, many years before I kind of got my frog fishing dialed in, and lots of people have this issue. And the main issue with a hollow body frog is, despite the fact that it has a hollow body and you think that you're going to have good hooking percentage, you still have a bait that has to compress before it exposes those hook points. And on top of that, which may even be a bigger issue, those hooks that they put in these hollow body frogs, pretty much every brand is going to use a hook that is super heavy duty, very thick gauge wire, and overall it requires a lot more force to be able to get this hook into a fish's mouth. However, the caveat to that is that once you do get a fish hooked, it works very well at keeping them pegged. You very rarely lose frogfish once you have them hooked, but getting them hooked is really the trick. So there's a few things that I think that if you're not already doing, these could really help your hooking percentage with a hollow body frog. And really it mostly relates to the tackle that you're using. Again, considering the fact that it requires a lot of force and a lot of getting stretch out of your setup, or slack out of your setup, to be able to get those big thick hooks into a fish's mouth, having the right tackle is the most important factor to me. The first thing that I just absolutely have to drill home is that I very much believe that using anything but braided line for frog fishing is a real issue, okay? Monofilaments and fluorocarbons, though great lines for many techniques, including many topwater techniques, they are not good hardly at all for throwing hollow body frogs, not because they're a weak line, and not because they don't have qualities that do work well with topwater baits like frog baits, but because they have so much stretch. And stretch is literally the greatest enemy to fishing a hollow body frog when it comes to the hook set. Because if you have a lot of stretch, you're just not going to be able to drive those thick hook points into the fish's mouth. And so braid doesn't have any stretch, or it has so little stretch that you really aren't going to notice it at all. And so braided line, this is the line that I like to use with all my frog fishing, whether I'm fishing over grass mats or in open water, skipping underneath docks or overhanging trees. This is Seaguar Tactics. It's actually an inexpensive line, and it's a 4-strand braid. And a lot of people like to go to like 8-strand braids where it's a really smooth, round, shape braid. But I really like Tactics because it's kind of has that abrasive, kind of braidy texture to it that helps me cut through grass. So if I'm making long casts, which it actually casts very, very well, I like that kind of abrasive texture because it'll help me bring those fish back to the boat in heavy vegetation, which is a situation you're primarily going to be throwing a frog in. So braid, including Tactics, is a really critical choice that you need to make when throwing a frog. So that's the very first thing. Eliminate that stretch. If you eliminate stretch, you're really going to improve your hookup ratio with frogs. And another note on braid is I really like to use no less than 40-pound tests. So this is about as light as I'm going to go. A lot of people will throw 30-pound test, which is great too. I think that 30-pound test is going to give you, it's going to make casting a little bit more manageable and easy. But 40-pound test tends to work really, really well in those open water situations and skipping underneath objects and things like that. And then I won't go any lighter than 65-pound braid for fishing real thick, heavy grass mats. I think that 65-pound braid is the sweet spot for those real thick vegetation circumstances. But the reason why I don't go any less than a 40 is because I've actually broken a lot of frogfish off, even in open water when I'm not dragging them out of cover, with 30-pound test braid. And that's just because you are really hammering those fish when you set the hook with a frog. And when you don't have any stretch, there's just absolutely no give. So 30-pound braid can still break if you set the hook really, really hard, as you should with a frog. So 40 to 65-pound braid, that is going to be a big deal for you. The next thing that I think is super important when setting the hook on a frog is having the right rod. You could have the best line out there, and then if you use a rod that is too spongy, it has too much flex to it, you're going to negate all the stretchless quality of the braided line that you're using by using too limber of a rod. So really I don't go to like an extra heavy power rod, but usually I'll stick with a heavy power rod with a fast action, or even an extra fast action. So if I'm fishing, more open water targets, skipping underneath overhanging limbs or underneath docks and things like that, I'm going to be using a 7.3 heavy Fitzgerald all-purpose series rod. This is my favorite rod for those open water situations. It's short enough to be super accurate, but it also has just a slight amount of tip to be able to really walk that bait very well. So it's a great rod for that, and it allows me to get good solid hook sets. The next one I use on a regular basis with my frog fishing is if I'm fishing heavy grass, fishing late season grass mats or fishing around pads or something like that. This is called the Okeechobee rod, a 7.6 heavy rod from Fitzgerald. Really great grass rod to fish with a frog. If I'm going to Guntersville or even Chickamauga here and I'm throwing frogs, 120 feet over grass mats and stuff like that, both of these rods are phenomenal for that. But the biggest key is using a rod that is at least a heavy power. Well, I say at least a heavy power. I think a heavy power is probably the sweet spot for a frog. Once you get into the extra heavy, I feel like that may be a little bit too much overall because it doesn't allow you to cast the frog as much. You want a rod that still has a little bit of bend in the tip. So when you go to cast the frog, whether you're skipping it or making long overhead casts, you want a little bit of flex in the tip, just a tiny bit, to be able to load that rod up and make really long or accurate casts. I think that's really important. But you want a stiff backbone that doesn't bend hardly at all until you get towards the tip there. So anyways, I really think that a lack of a good hooking percentage throwing a hollow body frog really comes from not utilizing braided mainline with very little stretch, and also using too soft of a rod. If you're using like a medium heavy rod, you're really going to have a hard time driving the hook home. And if you're using a medium action rod or medium power rod, you're definitely going to be missing pretty much every single fish that eats that frog. So obviously there's going to be a lot of people that disagree on some of these points, but to me, braid and a heavy power rod with a fast action, those are very, very important. And I think that's probably going to help alleviate some of your missed fish with a frog. So anyways, let me know what you think about this topic in the comment section below. If you want me to cover a topic in a future video, either ask me a question or you know, throw me a topic you want me to cover. And other than that, I've got all of the products that I talked about, including the Gambler frog that I really like, in the description below. You'll find those links there. And I'm going to see you guys out on the water. Make sure you trust the process.